Hello, everybody. I'm Joanna Schnedler. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Music Coalition, and I'm so glad that we have you all joining us here today. Just as a bit of housekeeping, if you could make sure that you stay muted during the conversation so that our panelists can be the ones who are visible and heard, that would be great. And it also helps to probably keep your videos off, preferably. And again, I'm so happy that everyone is here and that we are doing this web workshop on merchandising for musicians. And why don't we get started right off the bat with introductions. I personally love it if people can introduce themselves. And so I'm going to ask our two panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll get started. Emily, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, my name's Emily. I use she and they pronouns, and I lead the chamber pop septet Sister Species. I play accordion, and we have 3 trumpets and a bunch of other stuff. And then I also play in the synth pop trio Betazoid, which I figured I just would shamelessly wear our merch right now. And I have done like a mix of very DIY, like extremely slow screen printing, like literally cut and pasting with glue and scissors kind of merch, and then also some more formal, like ordering through different companies merch. So I could talk to that. And my kind of like interest or emphasis is on being community oriented and having merch that is affordable, and also that is about building community connections in the process. So I guess like anti-capitalist merch is like my lens. So that's me, and I'm excited to get to know some of you.
Great, thank you. Nick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Joanna, and thank you, Emily. I am Nik Kouzes. I'm I guess you could call me an artist. I've been doing this kind of stuff for a while. Background is as a musician and illustrator, and I worked for a few years at a company in town here called Noiseland as a designer. Helping musicians release their music through design and duplication services back when it was CDs and DVDs and download cards, but they still exist today. They do some other merch and release products as well. But currently I'm the creative director as a brand and marketing consultant, and I can speak today to the importance of brand and helping kind of bridge design and brand and put that into your communications and make that part of your merch strategy. So I'm happy to talk about that and field questions as we get through this. So thank you, Joanna, for inviting me.
Great, thanks. And I'll also introduce myself briefly because I'm both serving as our moderator, but kind of as a panelist too. So I, before the Music Coalition, which I'm pretty new at, I was executive director at the Minnesota Theater Alliance for several years. And prior to that, I was general manager at the Fitzgerald Theater. So a lot of the work that I did with merchandise was as a venue working with bands who were selling their merch. So I can speak to some of that. And I also, a little further back, spent several years working at a nonprofit social enterprise that ran a custom apparel and promotions business, and got insight into the world of merchandise from the side of the vendor. So I can speak a little bit to that as well. So our first question is perhaps the most valuable, one of the most important values of having merchandise is to build name and brand recognition. Do you two agree with that? And what does building brand recognition mean for a musician or a band? Please acknowledging that we could talk about brand itself as a topic for a full workshop, I'm sure. But what do you think about brand and building brand with merchandise?
I'll just jump in. I think, I do agree with that sentiment. I do also think that, there's, in terms of the value of merchandise, I mean, it's a tool it's a communication tool to get your name out there, but it's also, I think, really it's about giving your audience or your community a bit of ownership over your brand. So you're inviting them to participate in your community. And so as a leader, you want to be able to create things that invite people to the table. So I think that the merchandise is a great way to do that. And it really depends on what your sound is, what your image is, what your performance, and really what your whole concept is as an artist, and what are those channels then? What do those merchandise channels represent? So that's kind of would be my response to that. I think it's that I would agree with that. Yeah.
I think also just jumping on that I think merch is often about connection, or like when I have got merch from a band, like if a band could have really cool merch, and if I like wasn't moved by their music, I have one t-shirt that's by a band who I've never heard of, but the shirt's very cool. But in general, for me, it's about like, if I have a connection with the band, then I'm more likely to want to like take a piece of that band home, or to have a piece of that band on my body. And I also think that just in like when it's safe to play shows, I think that having a merch table also is a space where people feel comfortable coming to connect with you. And yeah, it can be like a start of a conversation. So.
I totally agree with that as well, Emily. I also think like it creates that personal, a personal reminder of your brand for whoever purchases that piece of merch. You're constantly reminded of that experience, that connection that you referred to. When you're connecting with your audience, you're doing that through music, but you're also doing that through the image and the brand that you put out there. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it.
I think kind of about that too, that yeah, I'm like no expert in branding, but I also think some people get like, I don't know, for some projects it maybe matters to have like a recognizable logo or like something like that. But I definitely have made plenty of merch that like doesn't say my band name on it at all. Or like sometimes there's a merch strategy of like, I don't know, maybe you thought your band name was tacky, so you put like lyrics on a t-shirt, or maybe you made a pin. These are things that I've done. Maybe you like made a pin with like a alligator on it because you have an alligator puppet and you think it's funny. Like, I don't know. There's like a lot of reasons why people make merch. And I think that people can connect with your merch, whether or not, I think sometimes when merch looks like too clean and like too sexy, that depending on who your audience is, that like, I think people want to connect with bands and not brands. So there's sort of like I feel like there's an art form there also of like being recognizable, but also like not looking like Target, unless your band is called Target.
Absolutely. You're right. I mean, that's a great point. I mean, people are trying to connect with artists, musicians, people really, and so, and that experience that they have with them, that shared experience. Yeah, it's really just, again, I would just go back to those kind of components of what really a band brand is. And, it is first, I think, because it's as musicians, it's about the sound, it's about the music, it's about the message that you're creating. So that, I think that's an important piece. And that's kind of plays into genre a little bit, because you could, there are a lot of bands out there that wear masks or use makeup as part of their performance, as part of their image. And so I think that's another brand component too, which is about the image, or what's your concept, what's your story. There are bands that again is a part of the way they connect with their audiences. They put on a performance through persona, where they create props and image to help promote the type of music that they're making. I think the other brand component is about personality and character. And I think that's, Emily, what I hear from you is that idea that people want to connect. They want to connect with not just the music itself, but the creators of that music. And so beyond that, what are their views on the world? I mean, they express that through their music, I would imagine, but there are many ways to connect based on personality and character. And performance is another way, and another expression or component of the brand, which is really more of that audio visual piece. There are bands that use a lot of video as part of their brand image, and that doesn't necessarily have to be centered around logo. When we talk about brand, we're not talking just about logo. We're talking about all of the things that make up who you are. I think probably one of the best descriptions of brand, and I'm sure we're all starting the conversation in different places, but the best definition that I've heard, because it can get kind of esoteric, is brand is really about reputation. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. So your band t-shirt, your merch, somebody sees it and they go, wow, that's a pretty cool design. What is that? Oh, that's this band that I like, or then you get to share that experience and you get to talk about that band at multiple levels, that artist, that group, whatever it may be. So performance, I think, is another key component to that. Also, if you're a publishing artist or you have releases where you're publishing them through digital means or through SoundCloud or whatever, your releases also speak to your brand as well, what you're associated with, adjacent artists and that type of thing. Your label, if you're on a label or distribution. So I think that's another component. And then lastly, the biggest component and most important, especially as it relates to this conversation, I think, is the community. The community, your audience, your followers, beyond just, when I say followers, I'm not talking about just social media. I'm just talking about there are, we follow the musicians that we like. We like to hear what they have to say about things outside of the context of their music as well. So those, I think, are the main sort of facets of what brand, the components of brand. So when thinking about creating merchandise, think about more than just a logo, because it's not just about taking your brand icon or your symbol. It's all the things that speak to who you are as a brand and incorporating that into the concept of how you're communicating. So Emily, I totally agree with you. It's not, there's a spectrum. There are some bands that are very much, they want to brand themselves. They have a symbol they want to stand behind. But then there's other artists on other ends of the spectrum that it's really just about expressing who they are as people and life. So
right. The other thing I would add to that too, in kind of knowing your audience, like especially with, like, I think of probably the thing I sell the most is like CDs and vinyl, and I think knowing what your audience, how your audience likes to listen to music is a big thing. Where, like, for example, with like Sister Species, we make a lot of CDs and vinyl, and they sell pretty similar amounts. And then with Betazoid, we like only made cassettes just because we're different. Like Betazoid is more like we're gonna play in someone's basement kind of band, and Sister Species is more like we're gonna play in public or whatever. So it just is like, if you know your scene, you can get a better sense of like what the demand is. And I've also found that, like, if people care about your band, they'll probably tell you what they want. Like, I had a friend be like, I love your album art, why don't you ever make posters of it? So I like made a couple posters, which mostly just this friend wanted. But yeah, my only other like hot note for starting this conversation also is that, like, most of my merch sales are to friends and family, and maybe they're like loose friends or like acquaintances. But I think that, yeah, and that might not be true for everybody's band, but I know that like that definitely, like, people who I know or like coworkers and stuff like that have been the biggest supporters of my merch, which is great. It's just like an observation that I've personally made that I imagine other people also have a similar experience. So.
Well, I think that's a great lead into my next question, actually, which is that, like, as you're figuring out your brand, one of the first steps of preparing to get merch is creating the art. So that could relate to the logos, the album covers, etc. It can be, about the image of the whole band or just an album. But let's talk about how you obtain your art. Do you create it yourself? Do you work with a graphic designer? How do you find someone who does this, and how do you vet what they do before you decide you want to put your music kind of in their hands to create that art?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think getting to partner with an artist is so exciting, whether you're partnering with them for album art or at like a photographer who's doing your band pictures or other design. It can be exciting and scary. I'll give an example. My friend Sarah Roosh I made the Betazoid shirt, which I'm wearing, which we made after she first designed the album art for our cassettes, which looks like this. It's like simple, kind of like alien. Got a little pic. Yeah. So she made that. And then kind of based off of this vibe, we worked with her to make the shirt I'm wearing and then these really cool alligator sparkle mouth pins. But yeah, Sarah was like a friend of the band who had supported us and come to our shows and who we knew did graphic design work. I think that if you have friends who are visual artists, that like one plus is that you might be able to work out some kind of trade with them, or that they're like, like we paid Sarah and then also traded some merch. So it was like less expensive working with her than with someone else. Whereas like for Sister Species, here we go. We've done like different album art, and like recently, like this is our most recent album, and this was made by an artist who lives in Louisiana who I've actually never met, but is friends. I basically just like put out a call to friends being like, do y'all know anyone who you think would, like, our music, who do you think would make a good album art person? And then I looked at her stuff and I emailed her, and it just like seemed like a good fit. But I think from seeing her other images, I like had a feeling it would be a good fit. And also because I don't personally know her, it's like I paid her, her artist rate. So I think there's like a couple different questions you have to ask yourself. You have to be like, how much do I want to pay an artist? Because I think that as artists, we know that artists deserve to get paid. So if you want to pay someone else, that's a question. And then do you want to pay a friend? I've also like designed some merch. Yeah, I don't know. I've like done some myself or done some in band. I think the other exciting thing about partnering with someone who's not in your band is that then maybe your music gets introduced to whoever their artist network is. So that can be a plus of working with somebody else. But yeah, I think it's just worth it. I mean, at this point, most people have like an Instagram or a portfolio, and I think you can see where people have worked with before. Yeah, but I think it's kind of a personal decision. I think finding someone who you can communicate honestly with, like where someone's going to give you a draft that you can be like, oh, that draft actually like makes me uncomfortable or whatever the issue is, that for me, that's been important to like have some like level of consent and control in the merch making process. Yeah, I also think that if you find someone who you really like, then you can keep working with them. I also want to shout out that you can work with artists just to make like, we have all these different posters from shows that we've played, some of which I've made and some of which other people have made, but that can also be like a nice test run. Like if you want to work with someone on something, but you're not sure how serious you want to be about it, you can be like, let's do a show flyer together. And then if the show flyer experience goes well, you can be like, great, design my album cover. But I think that like knowing how serious of a commitment you want to make to someone, if that makes sense.
That's a great, I think that's a great answer to that question, Emily. I think there's, I would just add to that by saying, really just depends on, what you're trying to communicate and what you're after. Really knowing, what you want your album cover to look like and what your concept is, what your idea is. And if you don't have that and you want to partner with somebody and collaborate with somebody who can help generate that, look for places of inspiration, whether on, Instagram or online, anywhere, whatever your channel is. If you follow other artists that you like, you can see who's in their network and see kind of some of their work and go about it that way. It's always good to have friends that are artists and hit them up and hit up their networks as well. I've been fortunate to, on the pieces that I've worked on, to do the illustration as well as some of the design work, the production work as well. But I've worked with other bands who it's just that it for this assignment this go around, this album, this concept, they want to work with this style of illustration or this type of artwork. And the next go around, they want to move somewhere entirely different. They want to reinvent what they're doing. They want to change. And so they don't ever want to come across as being consistent. So it really is up to each artist and what your vision is. There's tons of designers and illustrators and artists that are hungry to collaborate and work on that stuff. So it's always good.
I think that time and money is a real piece too, where like when we were making the album art, we had like a certain timeline, and I'd like asked some other people who the timeline didn't work for. So I think knowing your budget and timeline beforehand, like sometimes I've needed to make merch on a quick turnaround because I'm like doing something last minute, and that's not a work environment that everybody wants, but some people like that. So I think you just have to find like who, yeah, I think being honest and upfront about what your constraints are, and like if you have, being honest with yourself about what your budget is also, and with the person, I think that can save a lot of suffering. Or like you don't want to get into a conversation and have someone show you beautiful art and then they're like, it's $3,000. And you're like, wow, I don't make that much money ever because I'm a musician. Like, you know, I think that's just worth being pretty upfront about what your constraints are beforehand too.
That's an excellent point too, because I mean, how many times have we all confronted that situation either by putting it out there or being asked ourselves like, hey, this is a great opportunity for you. I don't have any money, but really if you invest in this idea, you know, it'll get you exposure. And that can be a good thing. I mean, it depends on where you're at in your career, but I totally agree, Emily. You said earlier that, you know, artists need to get paid, and that can be small, but, you know, have that conversation up front. So you're not, you know, you're setting expectations up front. But I think it just does all go back to the idea, like what's the vibe of what you're trying to communicate, and how do you want that to come to life, and having a good sense of that as you're going into the conversation is a great place to start for collaboration.
Cool. Well, that is also a great lead into my next question, which is so most of our member musicians are trying to run their music business for themselves or their band. And how does merchandise fit into the total business model? What are the ways that musicians can professionalize the merchandise part of their business so they're set up for success from the beginning? And, you know, I have a few thoughts on that one as well. So I'll jump in really quickly, just from, you know, being in a venue and having a lot of musicians and their merchandise come through the venue, and knowing that every venue is really different. I think, you know, one of the first thing, and I know that I also recognize we may not be in venues for a while, and maybe we will, but just thinking about that performing in live performance spaces side of things. I think having that conversation with the venue about, hey, you know, is there a table set for me? Is someone there going to be selling merch? Do I need to bring someone to sell merch? There are some places where, you know, you have to, they sell the merch and they may take a fee too. So it's important to have the conversation about that, because it is a little bit of an awkward conversation the night of, to do merchandise and then, you know, go to settle out with an artist and be like, all right, we're taking our cut. And they're like, what cut? So that's a really good thing to be pretty upfront about as well. And the other thing that I would say is huge is inventory. Start thinking right from the start about inventorying all of your items. They obviously, you pay money for them, you invest in them. They have worth and value. You decide your pricing structure for those items, and then before and after every show, you count out what you have and what's remaining. You know, and you definitely, you know, take notes then of what you're giving to people. If you're like throwing a t-shirt to so-and-so, record that. You know, that's part of growing your business too, and that has its own, you can deduct that on your taxes or whatever. Now, I'm not a tax expert, so I'm not going to claim any tax expert stuff on this. But the other thing I would say about running your merch business is that, you know, some items do require paying sales tax in Minnesota. And so get yourself familiar with the Department of Revenue tax laws, you know, and know that, you know, like clothing, for example, is not taxable, but other items, and, you know, looking at their list, you know, quite a few other items that people might have as merch are taxable. So again, familiarize yourself with that stuff. We're all, you know, we kind of all learn as we go, as you know, starting out businesses. And it's just good to familiarize yourself with things like taxes and sales tax and inventory. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it should be something.
I think also when you're, when at some future day we're playing shows again, if you have a friend who's willing to work your merch table, at least for part of the night, that can be really helpful. Like, especially if, like if you have a lot of gear that you have to set up and take down and you know you can't be to your merch table right away. I think it can help to enlist a friend. And also what I've found is that my friends are like less willing to give deals than me. I'm always like, you want it? You should just take it, which is great. But I find that my friends are like, yeah, you should buy that for my friends. So I think if you have people, you know, who really love doing inventory, I'm like very bad at it, but I try to do it. So it helps when I have a friend running merch because they're probably going to do a better job than me. The other thing that I think about with merch is like, what are you, like, how are you going to set up your stuff beforehand so that it's not a hassle? Or like one lesson that I learned is like when we first, I'll show you an example. Like when we first made t-shirts, we were trying to like not buy new t-shirts. So we screen printed like a bunch on just like totally like random. There's like one like this, there's like one like this. They're just like, you know, they're totally random, and the chaos feels like that. And then like eventually we made shirts that were like a different design, and that also we're like we have these from extra small to 3XL, and like, and it was very clear to share that, as opposed to being like, yeah, I've got one tiny pink one giant green one, like that. I don't know, which in some settings is fine if you just want to have a thing that people are like rifling through. But that was a helpful lesson for me also, of like, oh, the like I liked the value of doing all used shirts, and then at some point it made sense to get something that was just a little easier to work with. So yeah,
that's a great perspective from both of you, Joanna and Emily. I was, as you were talking about your examples, I started thinking about the other channels, you know, for merch, you know, because it is such an essential part of revenue for being an artist. You know, you have your venue, money that you make from the venue, but you also, you know, can make money 24/7 using channels on the web, digital, you know, e-commerce and that type of thing. So if any of you are looking at those types of strategies, print on demand services or create on demand services are great. But I think also recognizing where, you know, who are you serving with that? Like, you know, there's going to be a significant portion that's taken, those companies will take if they're managing your inventory and that type of thing. If it's a print on demand thing, you know, instead of making, you know, $10 for each shirt that you sell, you may end up only making $2, which things like Threadless and other shops like that, where you can create art and put it up there and have an artist shop, you're just probably not going to get the biggest return for what you're doing. So really thinking about how you are going to market online through those digital channels. There are a lot of screen shops locally that do lots of different swag and merch printing capabilities. It's worth hitting them up to talk about, you know, from an inventory standpoint, if they can work a deal with you to do like a print on demand type of thing, where they can keep your screen on file and on account, if you will, and then you can call them and place orders for shows so that you're not paying as much of the setup charge for each time. It's a reoccurring revenue model for them as well as for you. So I guess where I'm going with that is just really be cognizant of the end game and how you're looking to make money on your merch, whether it's through digital channels or through local partnerships and whatnot with different shops.
I also feel like with a local partnership, then you also get the chance to, again, kind of similar to supporting artists, you get to support a local business too. Like we've done, I'm like blanking on the name right now. We've done all our printing at this like queer and trans owned printing place that I will shout out when I remember what their name is. And I feel like there's like so many amazing Black owned printers in Minneapolis. Like there's like, so like, if you're trying to give your money back to your community, it's not hard to find folks locally who will do that. I hadn't thought about also like, that you can do on demand printing. We've always done like get like 50 at once and then over many years you get rid of them, but that's cool to know that that's also that's an option too, especially if you don't want to front the cost up front. I think also that you can get like you can have people do pre-orders, and you can do that in informal ways too. Like if you have like an Instagram, or I don't know, I guess I personally use Instagram the most, but I feel like if you have like a gentle following on Instagram, that you can be like, well, you want to pre-order a tape, like Venmo me, and that then you're working with people directly. I know that myself and a lot of other musicians use Bandcamp, which I imagine people are familiar with, and Bandcamp takes 10% of physical sales and 15% of digital. But they also recently have been doing like a once a month day when they don't take their percentage of it. But I found that gets like the most traffic. It's like really searchable and like extremely easy to use. But it might depend on your genre also. I know for our genre, Bandcamp is like the most common like internet place. Like way more people order from our Bandcamp than from our website.
It all goes back to who your audience is, and that's a great thing about musical artists, right? There's so many different genres, and everybody is so unique, and brand is such an important part of making yourself so distinct, and that comes out naturally for a lot of artists. And so really recognizing where your audience shops and or where they live and what they support, and guiding them that way. If Bandcamp's the way to go, it's great. If you've got a good following on Facebook or Instagram, that's a great place to set up merch as well.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Emily.
Just that I think that also having like being conscious of price point is important. Like we do a lot of our merch sliding scale. So like all of our vinyl is 20 to 25. And I think that gives people who are able to be generous the opportunity to be generous, but then also like means that you're not discriminating against people who can't afford your merch. And I think that's, I don't know, that like having some things that are less expensive, and also like knowing what things that you potentially can give away for free. Like if someone's coming up to my merch table and they're like, oh, I don't really have, like I can't afford your $20 t-shirt or whatever, then maybe I'm gonna be like, oh, have this cute download code, or like here's a poster that I made that like you can have this poster. So like knowing what, I don't know, like knowing what things that you have to, like we have to price vinyl more, otherwise we're not gonna make our money back on it. But some things you don't have to price as high. And I think that having pricing options is helpful, and B, having like a variety of different types of merch. And again, this is like a depends on your audience thing. I've definitely had some people be like, I don't get sliding scale. And like, I don't mind explaining that to people. But if you're someone who doesn't like talking to people and doesn't want to explain that, then maybe that's not the right fit for you. But I've found that it is a helpful thing.
You just brought up a great thought too, Emily, that I just triggered one for me, is the merch strategy. When you're thinking about it from a business standpoint, you're going, obviously I want the biggest bang for my buck. I'm going to be investing time and resources into creating stuff, and I want to make sure that, I'm going to make my money back. There's not going to be a loss there. I mean, and there's a lot of different things that you could bring to the merch table or bring to your website or post. And I think it's understanding that the strategy could be to have a lot of different tiers of merchandise so that people can engage and connect with you at a level that fits their budget and what they can do. I mean, a pin, for example, is a lot more accessible and easier to purchase than a hoodie. I mean, a lot of just the base cost for purchasing a hoodie and screen printing, I mean, it's, you're talking $40, $50 and up. And if you want to get into embroidery costs, that gets even more expensive over screen printing. So thinking about, again, going back to your audience and understanding that, offering a spectrum of merchandise in your portfolio so that everyone can engage with your brand. You engage with you. I use the term brand because that's kind of the esoteric word about it, but to engage with you and your band, to make sure that you have a little bit of everything, from t-shirts to some people have drink can koozies or butt pins, stickers, whatever you do.
So, you kind of just answered my next question a bit, both of you, but, what products, items should musicians consider for themselves for merchandise? What should they avoid? I will take this moment also to note that I just came across at our house, my husband brought home this face mask with a screen printed logo on it. So those are available now. You can investigate that for your fans, as well as hand sanitizers with logos on them. So just wanted to throw that out there as a relevant for the moment merchandise.
That's a great point. Being relevant, you're using your merchandise as a vehicle to be relevant, and having, what should you avoid? I mean, waste. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, a lot of bands will just buy what they think they need and they'll bring it to the table, and a lot of it ends up, they don't sell it. I know tons of bands that, like, they've got just cases of stickers and just garbage that they purchased over. There's koozies, can koozies and things. And it's like, it's be smart about what you're going to get. I mean, if you're just starting out and you want to find out what sells, minimum t-shirts. You got to have a good t-shirt, right? And a good poster too. Those are affordable items. They're accessible, and there's a lot of services available to make it accessible to you from a business standpoint. But I think it goes back to the idea too. Like, if your concept is all about being on top of things, or being relevant or contemporary, I mean, think about what are the physical reminders of that, or what are the things that you can bring to life. Be innovative. Have some of the standards, but also be innovative. Come up with something that no other artist has that's unique. I think, Joanna, you brought up sanitizer and a face mask. I mean, that we're going to see a lot of that. We already are seeing some of that, and it's relevant to our times. But what are the types of items that tie back to who you are as an artist, and your message, and what's your concept, and how can you bring something new to the merch table that other artists don't have? I mean, I think that really, it reinforces who you are as an artist, but then also gives them something that's relevant too. So
yeah, I think the most important thing is to have a physical thing with your music on it. That's I don't know if like, when people are saying merch, if you're thinking like things beyond my CDs, but or like, maybe you don't make CDs anymore because only people who drive old cars have CDs, and so you're only making really cute download codes. But
I think it just goes,
yeah.
Just to cut in, I'd say it goes back to your audience. So like, I totally agree. I mean, if I was, just like your Betazoid, having everything on the cassette, I mean, that's because you are essentially calling to your audience and saying, I know this is how we want to be presented. This is the format. And you're absolutely right. it starts with the basis of having your music available for purchase. I mean, the album artwork, whether it's on a cassette or download card or even in a digital library, is going to have some sort of visual representation, the image of your band. So yes, definitely having that available, that is merch number one. But I think I was thinking of it as beyond that, like the other revenue streams that extend from that. You know, what else can you do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, we also kind of hit on, I had a question about vendors, and we hit on some of the points, but, you know, are there any other thoughts you have on how to find vendors or select vendors? You know, the one thought that I had was about kind of the, depending on if you're going local, I think this is more doable with a local vendor, to be able to kind of see a test run of a product, you know, and maybe that's more applicable to like really big orders. But, you know, I've been in the place before where you get a merch order and the logo you sent is like really tiny and you just had no idea and you never saw a mock-up and it's not what you want. And there you are with this huge quantity of items that aren't right, which is totally deflating. So what are your thoughts on the vendors you work with and on, you know, doing some mock-ups or just making sure that what you order is what you want?
I think, you know, it's part of that is customer service. I mean, I have gone back to different vendors after they have made mistakes. And I think it's how they handle those mistakes that gets me to work with them again. I won't work with them again if they've made a mistake again. Just because I don't have time for that. And we're all deadline driven. I mean, you're usually creating something for an event. And so you don't want to have a big box of stuff lying around. And I know, Emily, you could probably speak to more of the DIY approach to that because you have a lot more experience with that. But I'll just say, like, you know, I've worked with a lot of different shops and I try to work with those who have, they're kind of the best of breed. Like there's companies that do enamel pins. There's a lot more that are showing up online and stuff. But like I like to go to the best of breed. Like if they do enamel pins and then they also do you know, other kinds of swag and stuff, I tend to not work with those folks because they don't specialize in everything. They can't. You know, I like to work with people who specialize with a very specific focus. So enamel pins, I go to an enamel pin specialist. Someone who is screen printer, you know, I'd like to work with somebody who focuses just on that. And the ability to do like a press check or a little preview is great for those larger items. I mean, you don't want to have you know, boxes and boxes of albums or T-shirts or whatever it is, and have it all be wrong. I mean, they should do right by correcting it, but you're still stuck with waste. I mean, you know, from one of the early questions, I'd say is try to avoid as much waste as possible. And there's a lot of great local vendors that you know, you can walk in there and that's how they like to work. They say, come on down, take a look at, we printed up a sample here, or well, of course they're probably not doing it now during COVID times, but you know, they'll send you a picture or they'll send you a scan, or here's what it will look like. And they want to make sure that you buy off on that before it goes too far down the road. So I'd say that with that, just give yourself enough runway time too, some lead time for things, because depending on what you're investing in, there are upcharges, rush charges, which cost more money. So the more planning you can do ahead of time, the better off you're going to be, the more profitable you're going to be, hopefully, on that merch as well. So.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's pretty standard to at least get, I have not received like physical tests before, but I've always received like a digital test. I also am just going to put in the chat, Ritual Print is the people who they did these shirts and Sister Species shirts, and they do tote bags and baby onesies. They're great. They're local. I also think that like it's worth asking your fans if they want stuff. I think that, I don't know, that's a thought I'm having, is like, why would you make a bunch of tote bags if you don't know anyone who wants a tote bag? You know, there is like there's like an element of demand. Or like with that, the first time we made CDs, like we printed, like the first time we did it, not just like hand assembling our own super DIY, like burning it on the computer CDs. Like we were like, yeah, we'll just make 1,000. That's the best price point. And then like I still have like 200 CDs, you know? So I suppose over this time now it's become worth it, but at the time it was like, wow, that was like kind of a bold move, where there wasn't actually like a demand for that. I think we were like about to go on like a national tour, like there were reasons why we did that, and also we just were green and we were like, I don't know, yeah, I guess 1,000 is what you're supposed to do. So I think that there also is like a kind of what you were going to saying about waste and stuff, but I think it is, if you have a way to ask people who listen to your music if they want stuff, that it's worth it. Like I've used Instagram polls to do that, for example, or I don't know, if you have an email list, or if you just can talk to like 8 of your friends and being like, but wouldn't it be funny if I made this thing, would you buy it, you know? So I think having buy-in, no pun intended, from your audience is important. I'm not sure if that answers what question we were just talking about, but I wanted to say that. So
I think it did. I actually really like that idea about being able to ask your audience, and depending on where you're at in the conversation with your followers and your audience. Yeah, I mean, you can create demand for things, and if they see it and they like it and you're putting it out there, well, then put an order in. I mean, you can also do pre-sales on it, like I think you had mentioned earlier, Emily. So it's a great idea. That's a great way to control inventory, and then you're doing exactly what you're intending to do with your merch anyways, which is to build connection with your audience. Mm-hmm. And so that's a great way. You do that before you're actually creating the merch. So you're not shoving something down the pipe. You know, you actually are creating something that's fulfilling a need.
I think also for me, there's a level, especially if you are designing stuff yourself, of like, is this fun and joyous for me? Like I made a bunch of I started making like linoleum cuts during quarantine. I made these like little prints and stuff, and there wasn't, I don't know, and like some people have liked these prints, but I also made a bunch that just say, I'll show you, that are like trumpet party. It's just these like trumpet players having a party. Anyways, like nobody wants these is what I have discovered, but they were like really fun for me to make. I think they're cute. They brought me a lot of joy. So I just think also I think it's, you know, I would never pay someone else to make this, but like I think a lot of us are like multimedia artists or whatever. So I think it's worth it to, like, sometimes you make something and people end up liking it way more than you thought. Like I made these like how to survive the winter posters. These are just, I make these on like a copy machine at my work or whatever. And people like them. They're really easy. They're really fun and like therapeutic for me to make. And I people request them and they cost me $0, you know, or they cost me like 10 cents, whatever. They don't cost me a lot. So I think that that's worth thinking about also, is like, what do you like? Do you like designing anything yourself? So there's sort of this like time, money dance that you get to do. Or like another example, like because we're not playing shows for a long time, I feel like I have all this time and we're making this new vinyl, and I'm like cutting, I don't know if you can see this, but I am like doing a lino cut of like all the lyrics, which is a totally ridiculous thing to do and doesn't make any sense. And like I have a lot of time and it's pretty fun for me. And I feel like some people will enjoy that. And like they may or may not pay more for a vinyl that has like meticulously handprinted lyrics, but I think it does communicate aesthetic, or I don't know, or something. So dedication, I don't know. Yeah.
So some of as a follower of other artists, I mean, I think it's the more handmade items or the more DIY stuff that I've seen from bands, it makes me appreciate the them more. I mean, they get an opportunity to show more of who they are. I have a few of my favorite bands would create their own zines, or they would create their own publications that you couldn't get them anywhere except for at the shows or through their website, or by following them. So it was pretty exclusive. Whereas you could go get their T-shirt at a few different stores online or something like that. But yeah, more of that the personal touch kind of thing is a great idea and a great way to connect with your audience.
Especially if you enjoy doing it. I feel like that's like if it's miserable for you, like don't. And at some point it might become miserable for you. So like that's how I felt about, like, I enjoy screen printing, but not that much. And like the level of like hassle that it was to try to screen print stuff myself, at some point I was like, okay, I think it's time to pay someone else to do this. So, but that point is different for every person.
Well, we are, kind of coming up to the end of our hour. So I am wondering if either of you have any last things that you were like, oh, I really want to make sure people think about this when they're thinking about merch. What are those things?
One thing I've been thinking about right now is just like, how as artists are we responsible to our greater community? So like a conversation that my band recently had is that like we're gonna donate $5 from each of our albums to like local abolition and other efforts. So like I think that's worth thinking about also, is like, how can you incorporate generosity or like connectedness to community in your merch? I think that we have an opportunity as artists to have a mindset of abundance as opposed to scarcity. I think it's really easy. I know I've been like, but I'm not going to make any money on the record. And I spent so much money recording this, and like, money, scary. And then being like, okay, what if instead of coming at it from like a money scary perspective, I come at it from like a, how can I be more responsible to my community? So I think that that's worth considering too, as you're thinking about, as you're thinking about selling merch. And also just that, I don't know. I don't know what kinds of different bands people play in. I feel like when you're in like a mid-size, like mostly local regional band, like having merch is great. Hopefully it pays for itself, but it's like, I don't know that you're going to be able to quit your day job just because you have cool merch, but I still think it's worth having. So that's just like my only like realist opinion. So yeah.
I think this is my final words, and that would be, it all goes back to that idea, and merchandise as a word of itself feels like it can be kind of a bad thing. Like, we're creating, all this stuff, but no, it's you need to promote, you need to make money, and I think why not do it in a way that reinforces your concept as an artist and what you want to communicate, and have things and know your audience, know exactly what they would appreciate, what they would like, what they would use or could reuse. That's an important piece of it too. So just don't create a bunch of stuff because that's what you have to show up with, but rather create stuff that's of value, that's important, that it reinforces your message and the change that you want to make as an artist, or the reflection that you want to make in the world based on who you are as an artist. So I'd just say, really think about that idea and let that drive your strategy for merchandise.
Wonderful. We have a couple minutes. If anyone has any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. And that might we'll give people just a moment to do that. It also struck me in listening to what you both said, that there are a lot of choices that we can make when selecting our merch, that we can opt for the metal water bottle, with our logo on it, as opposed to the plastic water bottle with our logo on it. I am assuming that, the organic cotton and the plant-based dyes for screen printing are probably more expensive still. They were, many years ago when I was in a custom apparel and promotions business. But, maybe if the demand has been there long enough that they are getting more affordable, that would be my hope. But that those are the kind of choices that people can also make as they think about merch. And it doesn't look like we have had any questions come in. So I am so thankful to Emily and to Nik for joining me today, and for giving all your thoughts about merchandise and brand, and how we translate the brands of our music into something that is exciting for our community, and they can take with them into the world. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to all of our attendees for being here. And this webinar is recorded, so it will be available on our website in the next couple days. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
We did get a question. Sorry.
Oh, we did. Oh.
Yeah, which was, will you be listing vendors you like for merch types? I could like on the website or something, I could definitely send places that that I've used for different things. If there were like specific questions that you had too, I'd be happy to, you know, like if you're looking, depending on what kind of merch you're looking for, like one or the other or someone else might have better advice about it.
I agree. I'd be happy to share as well. I mean, there's
Great.
yeah, no problem. And thank you again for inviting me onto this call and this meeting. I think it's a great topic, and I think that, you know, for you had mentioned branding as well. I mean, I think there's a whole deep topic there of branding for musicians that I think is very closely connected to the way you express yourself, which in one channel is merchandise. So if that's of interest to anybody in the future too, I think that's something, you know, please share with Joanna or put in the comments there. We can revisit that at a later date.
Yeah, I'll put my email address in the comments in case you want to talk about DIY band stuff or whatever, but I'm happy to give advice. And if you want to buy any of my merch, if you go to sisterspecies.bandcamp.com, you can use the code SUMMER for 25% off. But you don't have to. You also can email me if you want anything. But
I want one of
no
those
pressure.
cards.
Oh yeah, you want one of these
that
ones
one.
or the
Yeah, that
show
one's
party?
cool.
Okay, great. Send me your email me your address.
I'll
This
do that.
costs $0, so you
Well,
can pay me
it
for
costs
postage
something. It
or
costs
whatever.
something.
Yeah.
All right.
Great. Well, thanks for I appreciate the invitation to talk about merch. It's definitely something I've spent a lot of time touching merch and thinking about how to do it better. So appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at our next web workshop.